Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Changing Tides podcast. In each episode, we invite guests to have honest conversations about their mental health journeys with the goal of destigmatizing mental health within the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Due to the nature of the podcast, we'll be discussing a variety of mental health topics and possibly triggering experiences. While we and the majority of our guests are not trained professionals, we encourage you to practice self-care while listening and seek professional guidance if you or a loved one is in need of support. With that said, let's start the episode.
Hello, my name is Mike Ahn, and I describe my mental health journey as painful and really difficult.
Hello, my name is Seol Lee, and I describe my mental health journey as challenging and ever evolving.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Changing Tides podcast. I am your host, Matthew Yonemura, and it's been awesome to do these episodes. I've been thinking back. Whenever I record this intro, I get really introspective, and I've been thinking about the fact that we are 12 episodes in, and it's been amazing to hear everyone's stories. And one of my biggest takeaways is the fact that all the guests have in some way, shape, or form discussed the fact that mental health is a journey and it's a learning curve, and ultimately it leads to growth, which I think is so important for individuals, whether you're going through mental health illnesses or struggles or not. So it's been awesome to hear this constant push towards a journey that everyone's experiencing. So that was kind of a lot, but I just thought I'd share that. I appreciate that about everyone that's been on the podcast. And it's no different for today's guests, plural, 2 guests. Super awesome to interview and get to know them. Changing Tides has been a huge fan of these people since before I was even on the crew, and I understand why after interviewing them. They created a comic book about their lives, a fictionalized version of it, but a comic book about their lives nonetheless, and it's super awesome. They are a couple, and who doesn't love a dynamic duo, a love story? Something to note, we do discuss suicide very briefly. It's not the focus of the episode, but be aware of that moving forward if you do decide to listen to this episode. It was an amazing interview, but it was an honor to talk to them. It was Mike, Ahn, and Seol Lee. Mike and Seol, thank you both for joining me on the podcast. I have not had the chance to talk to you either yet, but the Changing Tides crew loves you. LTSC loves you both. So it's really great to have you and to get to know you here on the podcast. So you both described your mental health stories in differing ways, but I think, there's a lot of learning and growth in how you both kind of described it. So Mike, I'd like to ask you first, just briefly, like why you described it the way you did.
Uh, you know, um, for me, like getting mentally ill in my mid 20s was probably, it was so unexpected, and it was just a shock, and it really derailed my life at that time. You know, I had been working and such, but after getting mentally ill, it was not possible to really do that. And even now, it's probably pretty impossible for me to hold down like some kind of job out there. And so yeah, it's been really rough. And I think the illness sort of made things really hard between me and Soul too. Yeah, so that's why for me.
Gotcha. Seol, so why did you describe it the way that you did?
Um, I think, I grew up in the 90s and mental health wasn't something that people really talked about. I know that, it's gotten so much better. And so it's not something I knew about. And so I've always, even as a kid, had anxiety. And then later on in life, living with Mike, who had schizophrenia, all of that. But even all throughout, I didn't really realize that there was such a thing as taking care of your mental health. And yeah, so it's been really challenging having to learn all of that. And it's all, even after you learn about it, and even nowadays, a lot more people do talk about it. It's always evolving. I think just as your life evolves, and then as you get older and your situation and circumstances change, you're also having to adjust and learn more and learn different ways and of taking care of your mental health. So it's been, yeah, challenging and also always changing.
Right. So I'd kind of like to backtrack a little bit and kind of hear like, I'm a big fan of like love stories and how things come to be. So if you can kind of tell a little bit about how you met each other.
Well,
Oh,
you can go.
it's a long story because we've known each other how long now? I've known him since I was 9. So we do have a bit of a age gap. So my family came from Korea. We immigrated and came in 1991. So Mike's dad is or was a pastor. He's retired now, at a Korean church. So our family started going there, and so that's how we initially met. But at the time, we were just going to the same church. But later on, I went off to college, and then that's when Mike was struggling with, you know, being diagnosed with schizophrenia and all of that. So then I didn't know that that's what he was struggling with or his diagnosis or anything like that, but I knew that there was something that he was struggling with, and there was a lot of talk kind of like behind his back and like what's wrong with him and things like that, a lot of judging. And so I kind of just had a general idea that he wasn't doing well. So I actually wrote him a letter, just how he's doing. And I was going out to church at the time too, and I was really into all of that, like on campus Christian group and all of that. So I was asking him, are you going out to church, or why aren't you going out to church? You should go back out to church and all of that. So I was reaching out to him, and then it kind of turned into romance, and then yeah, it went from there.
Mike, do you have the same story, or do you have another look on it?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much as she said. But when I got that first letter of hers that she wrote, and it was just out of the blue, I wasn't expecting or thinking anything would happen like that. And I actually didn't read the letter because I was just so mentally ill, and I was paranoid, especially of people. And so like I didn't read that letter at first, and she kept sending others, and slowly and slowly it started breaking through my the walls that I had erected around myself after I got ill. And yeah, and so just through her patience and kindness, of sending me letters and gifts too sometimes, it kind of like broke through all the pain, that I was feeling. And so and I started to let her into my life, little by little. So yeah, it's pretty much the same story. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was when he was in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So it was at the time when he was pushing everybody away, like all his friends and, you know, anybody, like even his family. So it did take some, yeah,
Just a
convincing.
little bit of time, a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, did you ever go back and read that first letter?
I did. I did. Well, I'm not sure if let me think. That first letter, I think to be honest, I actually think I threw it away.
Did I know this?
Yeah, and then, but she sent others, and so I started to read them, after a while. And yeah, I was in a really bad place mentally. I was just totally just, probably not fit to talk to people at that point. Yeah. And but it was her kindness though, and her patience that kind of won out in the end.
Yeah, I I can't say I understand because I know I haven't lived through your experiences, but you know, if you're at that point where that's why I smiled, like it's interesting that you threw it out, but you know, Soul, you stuck through it and you kept sending the so yeah, that kindness, like just through hearing it, like I didn't live through your experiences, but through hearing it, like I would that sense of kindness definitely comes through.
Yeah.
Um, so, Mike, if you can please explain your mental health story, you know, at what point you started to realize your mental health maybe wasn't where you wanted it to be, and, you know, just kind of how you went through the process of getting diagnosed and the whole, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, sure. You know, when I first actually got mentally ill, everyone in my family and the people around me, they highly suspected that that's what had happened. But I didn't know though. I mean, I thought that I was just having a really hard time, really feeling depressed a lot and stuff over things that had happened at church. And yeah, so at first I didn't even realize I had a mental illness. And I remember my mom telling me that she really was urging me to go see a psychiatrist. And in my mind, I was like, why? I don't need to see a psychiatrist, and but she kept asking and like crying and weeping and such. And so finally I decided to go with her to see a psychiatrist, and we went to a Korean psychiatrist in LA, and he diagnosed me there with a mild case of paranoid schizophrenia. And I didn't even believe it then. I didn't think. I was like, no way, not me, and it actually took some years before I finally realized that there was something amiss and something wrong with my own brain. So my mind kind of turning against me, if that makes sense. And so that's what happened. Yeah, and it's been just really rough, just every day is kind of is difficult. It's a challenge. Even now, it's like that. Yeah.
So, Mike, if you could just let me know, because, you know, I went to a psychiatrist for depression, and
Oh,
that's something that's medicated, of course. I'm
mhm.
curious how, you know, what the psychiatrist does for you in your situation.
Yeah. He actually does. He recommends therapy, like a one-on-one counseling, and also he prescribes medication for me. And so I'm on this medication right now called Abilify, and I'm on a pretty fairly large dose of it because I hear voices, and with the medication it kind of controls it, up to a point. And so yeah, it's just yeah, it's been really rough.
Yeah, and he's, when he's had kind of episodes, he's been in the ward. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to the word twice. Yeah.
Um, so I'm also curious, you know, once you said like a couple years later is when you kind of realized, you know,
Hmm.
after the psychiatrist even had told you, when you were like, when you realized that 2 years after that appointment, did you kind of look back? Did you have a sense of relief knowing like, oh, this is like a real thing? It's not something that I'm kind of making up. Like, was there any sense of relief that you had to know like this was medically like true?
To be really honest with you, it wasn't relief. I felt if I felt worse, and I actually attempted suicide several times after finally figuring out that I was ill mentally. And yeah, it's yeah, it's been rough. Yeah.
So, Mike, I want to get back to you, but for a second, Saul, you know, as his partner, you know, you weren't there in the very beginning, or you kind of were, but maybe not as his partner.
Mhm.
Um, when Mike has difficult times or was having difficult times, was it hard at first for you to navigate how to be there for him? And if so, like, you know, how do you kind of learn and walk through and navigate it to be there for him?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, totally. It was something completely new. So when I found out, like when I finally found out that he has schizophrenia, because he had been pushing me away, and there would be times when things would be fine, but other times he would basically be like, leave me alone. And this is after we started dating. And I didn't really know why exactly, but one of his friends actually told me what it was. And then so right then I like broke down and cried. Um, but yeah, I didn't have any tools to how to deal with that, deal with having, I guess at the time a boyfriend, a partner. Um, and and at the time too, I didn't realize that I could get help in this area, especially when we got married and all of that, and we were husband and wife. So we actually got into a lot of fights, and all of our fights were revolving around his paranoia. So then he was paranoid of people, just everybody in his life, including his family, friends, and even strangers. And then at the time, I think what I thought was that, oh, I should try to, because his paranoia, from an outsider's point of view, is not logical. So then I thought that, oh, I should try to explain to him why it's not logical. I should try to convince him why he's wrong, basically. And so for a long time, for years, I thought that that was what I needed to do. Like I need to convince him that he's just paranoid and what he thinks doesn't make sense. So I spent so much energy and time doing that. But what I realized at the end is that, if it was that easy, then people wouldn't have schizophrenia. Like they wouldn't be paranoid. It's not like, you can reason them out of believing what they believe. It just that's what they believe. So then I really had to learn how to let that go, trying to convince him, and trying to logically explain to him why it's wrong, like his thoughts are wrong. Yeah, and then it wasn't until later on when we actually came out, because we were hiding the fact that he has I can't say it, schizophrenia. Even from my family, we were hiding it. But when we came out with it and through our comic book and all of that, we started meeting a lot of people, and then that's when I realized that there's help for, not just him, but for me too, like for the caretaker. And that wasn't even that long ago. So for a long time, yeah, um, I struggled, and it's still a struggle. Yeah, it's not easy.
So I kind of want to ask, like, kind of like a evolutionary question. So from the beginning, when you were sending the letters, what kept you going even though you weren't getting a response? Like, why did you keep sending them? And then how did you, at what points did you realize I have to kind of change my mindset about how to be there for it? Like, how did you kind of get through
Mhm.
those steps?
Um, I think it was just years of, I mean, I guess I kept coming back because I loved him. There's no other real explanation for that. And I think part of it is that because I had known him for such a long time, it wasn't just like boyfriend girlfriend relationship. It's like I had a connection with him already. And then in my mind, I like there were times obviously that got so difficult that I wanted to leave. But then my mind I kept thinking that if I leave, like he has nobody. And then so I didn't want to leave. Um, and then yeah, I think like my realizing that I can't convince him, it just took time, because obviously like it was just kind of an epiphany, like, oh, like yeah, if I could convince a person who's paranoid that they're just paranoid, then nobody would be paranoid, right? Like so I realized, I think it was just so heartbreaking. Like it was too much for me. So I kind of realized that either I have to let it go, like I think part of it was like a control thing too. Like he needs to, I need to convince him, right? So I I think I just realized that if I was gonna stay with him, I need to let this go. Otherwise, it's gonna drive me crazy too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually really responsible of you because, when I talk to my parents or my friends or whatever it might be, when it's just like, for depression, for example, I tell them like, this isn't because of you. Like, I know you want to fix it, but sometimes you kind of just have to let it go. So that's something like I've been dealing with my partner, like as of late. Like whenever I have bad days, I have to like remind her like it's not because of anything that you could do or that I know you want to fix it, but it's something that just has we have to live through.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and Mike, sorry, I'm getting this is my first time I've interviewed two people at once, so I'm trying to go
Oh.
back
Oh,
and forth.
it's no
Um,
problem.
okay, cool. Mike, when if you could remember back to when you like, you didn't realize it, but like, do you think at what point there was like when you realized, or like you realized it 2 years after you were diagnosed? When you realized it then, did you look back to like when it was starting out and be like, oh, there's definitely something going on here, and like I don't know how I didn't realize it. Was there anything like that?
Yeah, it was something kind of like that. Yeah, it was like I could tell that I was mentally ill only obliquely, if that makes sense. Like, because it's my own mind, and in my within my own self, I thought I was okay, or I thought maybe I was just really depressed, but then just one day I remember, because I had kind of gotten to the habit of like yelling at clerks at gas stations and liquor stores and stuff like that, which is just really bad, but and in my mind I was justified, in doing that kind of stuff. And I realized that there's, that itself, that thought itself was, not kosher, not cool, and I was kind of wondering, why do I do that so much? And and it just, it kind of just, from that point, I thought in my mind, oh, I could detect it, but not like, I could detect it only obliquely, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
even now he has moments when he he knows that, like for example, he hears voices, so he'll say these can't be people, right? But then there are other times, so it's not like he realized he was ill and then from then on it was fine. Like he always had that like realization. It even now till this day he has moments when he realizes that the voices aren't real, or he thinks that it's very possible that they aren't real. But then there are other times he where when he still talks about the voices as though they're people, like who are spying on us and somehow talking to him through these devices. Yeah. So it's not like really black and white.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth. I kind of sort of have good days and bad days. And yeah, and it's hard because it feels like my mind is working against me instead of for me, It's telling me all these things, oh, that person there, he or she is, gonna try and do something bad to you. And my brain is telling me this, when in reality, actual reality, I mean, it's a person who doesn't even know me, right? Or I don't know them. And it's, yeah, it's kind of rough like that. Yeah.
You know, I think on a lesser scale for maybe like kind of something what I've tried to say to make people kind of understand maybe about what it's like with depression is when it's like vision. You don't know you have bad eyes until you realize you have bad eyes.
Yeah.
So like once you get glasses, you're like, oh, this is how everyone else sees. So I feel like it's the type of thing where like outsiders are like, oh, like how can you not see the difference between that or this? But you just don't, that's the life that you live. Then obviously you're going to expect that to be kind of the normal. So um I just think it's I kind of say that to bring it back to soul and say you have like the fact that you grasp it is a real testament to you because although you haven't lived it, you at least can do your best to understand it. So, um, testament to you and to Mike as well, because you understand that you have good days and bad days, and you're giving yourself that room to say I have bad days still. So I'm happy that you both have those things at your hand.
Yeah,
Oh, thank
thank
you.
you.
It took a long time.
Yeah, it took like
Yeah,
years.
to come to this
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Definitely, and I feel like that's with couples in general. You it takes years for you to find your comfort zone, no matter what it is. Not to downgrade your experiences or anything, but just to say like, you're gonna have growing pains no matter what. So
Hmm.
I love to hear that you have been getting there though. It's still evolving, of
Hmm.
course, but improvement. So that's awesome. Um, Moving on to the next question. Um, I was curious about, in a relationship in which one person has experiences with mental illness, what role between the both of you does communication play?
I have found that I I'm not sure if this is true just because I'm mentally ill or if it's true for all couples, but like I think communication is just maybe the one of the most important things because I can't read her mind, and neither can she. I have to tell her, like very clearly, and not assume that she just knows what I mean. You know what I mean? Yeah, and so that's something that I for me, yeah, communication is so incredibly necessary, important, and to so that there's no misunderstandings, between you guys, and yeah, so that's what I would say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just personality wise, Mike is he's an extrovert, so he likes to express himself and he tells me everything, sometimes a little bit too much. Like seriously, he'll talk about his paranoia. And so I'm the one who actually struggles with communicating my feelings. Like I basically pent up all my feelings and bottle everything up. Um, but I realized that yeah, I need to let him know, because I mean, because of his illness, I think he can really get into it himself and kind of block everything out. So unless I tell him my needs and what I'm feeling, then and it's really easy for me to do that. Like I can just go to my room and not talk to him. And yeah, I really think that if he weren't the type of person that he is, like all of our arguments would end up in just silence. But Mike is the type of person, like if we're fighting, he'll have to, like he has to make up, like make up, the fight before we go to sleep. Yeah. So yeah, communication is very important because yeah, especially, if one person is really ill, then the other person is just suffering. And if you feel like, oh well, you know, he's mentally ill, so I should just shut up about my needs, then then you just end up suffering by yourself. Yeah. So and I think that there were times when I couldn't really talk to him because he was very deep in his illness. So I think it's important that you have somebody else that you can talk to also, like a therapist or a friend or somebody who understands, because there will be times when I can't talk to him because he's in his own world. Yeah.
And I think that's also a good testament just to, any scenario where if you can't talk to your partner, whether it's like something you don't want to express direct, or you need to work through your emotions maybe before you address it with your partner. So Sol, I was curious about, I guess I'll bring that question back because I think we'll get to it in a roundabout way. But going along, you touched on it, and also, that's how uh, the world has kind of gotten to know your story. Maybe not the world, but like people have gotten to know your stories through your comic book. Um, so I want to know like how you came to the decision to tell the story through your comic book Out of Order, and can you tell us what it's about?
um, Out of Order is it's like a fictionalized memoir. So there are parts of it that are true, and others that are kind of made up. But it's basically a comic book series. It's a 5-issue comic book series that tells the story of me and Mike's relationship. So it's just chronicling, how we met. I mean, but that part is actually not true in the comic book. Like that's, but just like the ups and downs that we have gone through in dealing with his mental illness and growing together and healing and all of that. So we decided to tell the story. I mean, this only happened because Mike at one point got better, because for years he was so paranoid that we couldn't really even think about doing anything. Like there was no way that he was going to sit down and draw and for an extended period of time. But at a certain point, this was only maybe like 3-4 years ago, he decided that he couldn't handle the voices anymore. So he himself, because obviously I wanted him to always be on medication, but he refused for a long time. So he was on and off the medication. But at a certain point, he was like, I can't deal with them. I hate the voices. So he himself started taking the medication more consistently. So he stabilized enough to kind of, get back into society and do things. So that's when we decided to, I mean, and there's like the whole backstory too, to like how we decided, like when you want to tell the story, like why we wrote the story. And
Yeah, I got involved in a local comic book store in Manhattan Beach, California here. It's called the Comic Bug. And yeah, there's a lot of really awesome, nice people there. And they have a group within the store called the Sketchy Book Group. And it's a group of people who want to do comics, like either draw or write, color, whatever. That it's for those kind of people. And I was introduced to that group, and I kind of got motivated there to maybe try drawing a comic book, of our own. But they were taking submissions for some kind of romance anthology, like dark twisted romance anthology that they were working on, they were creating. And so me and Soul thought, why not just put our story in there? You know what I mean? Make, it's because our story very much has a lot of dark elements to it, kind of, yet it's still a romance. And so that's how it happened. And it started there, and then we decided, well, let's just tell our whole story. And so we went 5 issues with it. And so, yeah, that's,
yeah, so because I wrote the story for the anthology, but the anthology kind of got canceled.
yeah,
Like
it never happened.
yeah. So then we're like, oh, let's just publish it ourselves. Yeah. So then I wrote the stories, and then he drew them. And then we just started selling them at like comic book stores and a lot of conventions. Yeah. But at that point, yeah, like I said before, I think um I hadn't told, this had been like over 10 years, well, maybe 9 years into our marriage, but I still hadn't told my family that he has like paranoid schizophrenia. So then we were gonna come out with the comic book. So then I didn't want my mom to find out that way, like through the comic book, like, oh, you know. So then I was like, okay, I need to tell her. So that's when I told her and my sisters um, that he has paranoid schizophrenia. Like they knew that something was wrong, but they didn't know the specific diagnosis. So that's how I ended up telling them. And they were actually quite accepting. I think it was just kind of one of those things like, well, we already knew something was up. But at the same time, I think my mom didn't really understand. Like she still, I think, doesn't understand what schizophrenia is. Like even though I try to explain, and then her reaction was like, "Well, isn't he just like really like clinically depressed?" I guess like that's what she thought. And even when I try to explain, she kind of insisted, no, like kind of, I guess, in denial, or she just doesn't understand. So I don't really think she to this day really understands what schizophrenia is. Yeah.
We're taking a quick break to introduce Anchor, the sponsor of this podcast. Anchor is free, first and foremost, which is amazing. Who doesn't love free? And you can record everything directly into Anchor. It's so easy to use Anchor. That's how you are listening to this podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple, the Anchor website. You're listening to it because I uploaded this podcast episode to Anchor. If you want to start your own podcast, I highly recommend Anchor. It's made this whole process so easy. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I was curious if either of you had a passion for writing soul, and Mike, if you had a passion for illustration prior to the comic book, or was it something that really came out of you for the comic book?
No, I've actually wanted to become a comic book artist ever since I was like very young. Yeah, I spent years trying to break into the comic book industry, and haven't succeeded. But we're still keeping our fingers crossed, And yeah, so doing Out of Order, it was just because Soul always wanted to be a writer, and I think she's very good at it, personally. And so we thought, why not just combine our what we want into this product called Out of Order, and it's kind of become something like our baby. Yeah, and so
Yeah. Mike he has a BFA in illustration, and I have a BA in English. Yeah, so it's not like out of the blue. Yeah, we always wanted to do this. Yeah.
That would be pretty amazing if, like, all of a sudden this was kind of your superpowers that came out of nowhere, like for illustration and writing.
yeah, it would be pretty cool.
So you explained already that, like, where you started selling the books, but as far as getting it off the ground, in production and in selling, was it was it really truly all from you guys, or was there what's it called, a publisher that you went through, or how did you guys do all of it?
We actually learned a lot from that group, the sketchbook group at the comic book. There's a lot of people there. There's a mixture of people who are professionals and people who are just starting out and everything in between. And they actually helped completely. They like recommended where we can go to get the books printed out. They helped with everything along the way. Like I had some problems with drawing, especially when it comes to like perspective, where like these other artists who are there, they're like great at it, and so they would like help me out and like show me stuff about it. And so yeah, we're really thankful toward that group. And
Yeah, we're self-published, so we just did everything ourselves. Yeah, we didn't go through a publisher or anything like that.
we're hoping to, after we're done coloring the whole thing, we're hoping to get it picked up by a publisher. Though we're going to shop it to different editors and just kind of see what happens. Yeah.
That's awesome. Not only that, like, you did it yourselves, but now that fact that you're going to try to get it to a publisher, fingers crossed for you both. But
Thank you.
Thanks.
getting it off the ground, I'm glad that you give the shout out to the people at the comic bug and in that group, but I hope you also give yourselves the credit that you deserve, because you got help, but of course you made it. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
of
Yeah.
course. So in sharing your story so publicly, putting it in a book and then selling it, have any readers reached out to share their appreciation for it, or did you receive a reception that was unexpectedly, like, positive, or like, what was the reception like as a whole to your comic book?
I think that's the best part of this experience, and why we're really glad that we just decided to. Because a lot of people, I think, like talk about publishing or even just self-publishing, but they never do it. But we're just like, oh, let's just do it and see what happens. But yeah, like the reaction we received was, I would say, shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't think it was going to do as well as it has done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just like how many people, like even when we just pitched the book to people, like what it was about, like telling them what it was about, it was just so surprising how many people related to it and then told us, oh, I also have blank, or I know somebody who does, my brother or my parents or my kid, or yeah. So we were like, oh my gosh, like, and it wasn't just like once in a while, it was just so often
Yeah.
and just it made us realize that people want to talk about this, and there are so many people who are struggling and living with a mental disorder or mental illness, but they just don't talk about it until you bring it up and you're like, oh, me too. And yeah, and we've gotten emails of people writing us just like long emails about what they've been through and their diagnosis and how, and most of these people would say that they hide it. They don't tell people just because it's easier that way. They're afraid of like the stigma and judgment and getting fired or not getting hired and things like that. So, but it was so obvious from like the detailed emails that they want to talk about it so much, but they don't have anyone to talk about it with. And so when they realize that we're willing to listen, or we've gone through like a similar experience, and we've actually gotten letter or emails from people that we already knew, but we had no idea they had a mental illness, but
Yeah.
they came out and told us, and we're like, oh really, we didn't even know. And yeah, so a lot of people are just living and hiding.
Yeah. In my experience with opening up about it, you don't realize how many people, literally just what you just said, you don't realize how many people are living with mental illness until you kind of initiate, because then people feel more comfortable expressing it to you.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really unbelievable how many people in your close proximity or from a
Right.
distance are suffering with any type of mental illness. And I'm curious, Sol, earlier when you did mention about, you know, sometimes your need to talk to a friend or a therapist, did you gain that from the readers of the book, or did you kind of wander upon having an outlet on your own?
um I mean, I think yeah, public or coming out with the comic books and realizing and making connections with people, that is what got me to get a therapist. And also just talking to, yeah, people that I connected with through the comic book, um, and like people who just understood perfectly what I was going through and were so sympathetic. Yeah, I totally gained that from just opening up about my situation. I think so. At first, it was just that, like talking to people, readers, or like the connections I made through the comic book. And then, we would post about mental health on Instagram and things like that. And then at a certain point, I started feeling hypocritical, like I wasn't doing much for my own mental health. And so that's why decided to get a therapist. So yeah, and I only had a therapist for like maybe like 3 months or something like that. And I actually didn't really like the therapist. Like there were a lot of things that it just didn't work out. But even though it was like that, just being able to talk to like somebody, you know, about all the things, and not just about Mike, but just like all the um, you know things that have happened in my life, it just helps so much, like to unload. Yeah. And then and then so we moved and the pandemic, and so I wanted to get a new therapist. I still haven't though, because you know um but yeah, just it's amazing how like doing one little thing, it's like a domino effect. Yeah, so all these things have happened because we just decided to come out with our story.
And making that first call to a new therapist or to your first therapist, that could be like the hardest step, and then you're kind of
Mhm.
in your motion. So I definitely understand like changing or moving and then needing to make that first call again. It's like
Right.
it's such a process, and that's something that we talk about a lot within Changing Tides is people either not knowing how to make the first step or not having the energy or the capacity to do it because of whatever you're going through, or we already have a routine and a schedule that our own life already takes up, and then to add something else to it.
Mhm.
So but yeah, I think it's great that it's at least on your radar, because that's like that's actually the first step, is putting therapy onto your radar.
Mhm.
So I'm on that note also, for both of you, were there, from hearing from this kind of community, from people going through similar experiences, did you gain new tools or new lessons or approaches to your situation that you gained from people living through similar stuff?
Still here. I think mostly what I've gained is just the like it gives me so much peace that or like relief that there are other people like us. Like it's not something really rare at all. Um, and just knowing that there is a community out there and there are people just right around us and everybody is struggling with something. Um, I think just knowing that, I don't know if I've picked up tools necessarily, but I think like just as I was just talking about just going to therapy, just pushing me to do that. I think that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's more the knowledge that there is help out there. There are people out there who who want to help you and listen to you. Um, yeah.
Mike, in hearing from other people that have a similar mental illness or similar experiences, was there anything that you gained, or like, even if it wasn't a tool necessarily, or just like in knowing that, was there any comfort?
Yeah, I would say so. Like I actually became friends with one of the people who wrote to us after reading our comic book, and this he deals with a mental illness, and I was surprised because I kind of we became friends, and I was just shocked at how similar his symptoms are, and the things that he goes through that are very much very same as the stuff that I have gone through, and so it's like we have this like understanding, and yeah, it's been very helpful that way, and just meeting other people. He's a really smart guy, really intelligent guy, but yet he's got this illness, and I don't want to talk too much about him, I guess, but yeah, he just it's like there's like a camaraderie, there's an understanding there, and that was very helpful to me actually.
I love to hear that. Um, I know you mentioned the seeking publishers, but do you have other additions lined up, or what is next for Out of Order along with the publishers?
Oh yeah, he's just working on coloring because we published all the comic books in black and white. So then he's just working on coloring all of them now.
It's a lot
And
of work.
it's taking him forever because he's not a colorist. Yeah, apparently. I mean, there's a pencilist and there's an inker and there's a colors and they're all different. So he considers himself a pencilist, penciler,
Penciler, yeah.
penciler. Yeah. But we're doing everything ourselves. So he's trying to color all the issues. Yeah, so we haven't really thought about doing something else, like another comic book or anything like that. So because he's gonna take a while, I think. And he does like, other projects like helping his friends, his other comic book friends with small projects here and there, but nothing just for us or between us. Yeah.
Got it. Well, that's super exciting. And I kind of get that. I do film, and like you'll be amazed at how many different jobs there are to do one little like project.
Uh-huh.
Like there's the editor, but then there's also like the sound editor, and then like the colorist on the movie, and like so I get like
Yeah.
different, but like I understand like it's amazing how many people it takes to do something that maybe not everyone realizes is like
Right.
usually a multiple person job.
Right.
I have some quick fire fun questions, but before we get that, is there anything else you'd like to say before we get there? Or like final words or words of wisdom, even anything you want to say?
Um, I think just that I know that like I would never like pressure anybody to come out, tell their story. It's, you have to be at a point where you're comfortable doing that, you want to. But it's something that we realized after we've come out, I think, is that it's not that big of a deal. It actually is so freeing, to just come out, and I feel like there's actually less judgment, and maybe it's the times too. I know that a lot of people are openly talking about mental issues more. Um, but I would just encourage people to think about sharing their story, because it's not only going to help you, but it's going to help so many people too. And I know that, I mean, I can only speak for what I know. Like something like schizophrenia, if you're really deep in the illness, you're not even going to think about telling your story. Like you're in the thick of it and you're dealing with your illness, and that's all you can do. But especially if you come to a point where you can function in society, and you can work, and you can make connections with people, then I would really encourage people to tell their story and just be honest, and it can, yeah, just be really freeing.
Anything to add, Mike? Or is that kind of sum it up?
That pretty much sums it up better than I could. Yeah.
Awesome. So if that's kind of the closing words, I just have some quick closing questions for both of you. So if I ask one question, I'd love an answer from both of you.
Oh,
First one being, what is a skill you don't have but wish you did have?
for me, it would be marketing, promotion, business, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I really wish I knew how to do that better. Yeah.
I always, because I have social anxiety, so I always envy people who are able to just make connections with, like, make friends easily. Yeah, that's really hard for me. I've been lucky because I've been able to make lifelong friends throughout my life. But yeah, I wish I had a better, like, easier time just like connecting with people.
Um, I feel that. Don't worry.
Okay.
um, if you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
It's a toss up between either Hawaii or maybe Italy or Europe, someplace in Europe. Yeah, for
Yeah,
me,
we just came back from Hawaii,
not long ago.
but it
Oh,
was our first time and we loved it, so we want to go back. Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Hawaii, probably Maui. We went to
Mm,
Oahu.
okay. It's I was curious if you had like opposite like vacation wants, like maybe like Mike wanted Vegas and Soul maybe you wanted Hawaii. Like that'd be
Oh.
interesting, but it's cool you guys had a similar mutual agreement there. If you could give advice to yourself 10 years ago, what would it be?
Wow, you gotta go first. Let me think about it for a second.
I think just in general, yeah, I wish I mean, just something pretty typical, I guess, but I wish that I didn't care so much about what other people thought of me. I mean, I still do that. I'm like a huge people pleaser, and I worry about what other people think, and because of social anxiety too. But it's gotten a lot better, and I've really found myself a lot more, I think, who I am and what I like, not trying to please other people, but yeah.
uh, What was the question? I'm sorry.
If you could give advice to yourself
Mm,
10 years ago, what would it be?
it would be to not. I would tell myself to hang in there, and to just just do the best I can, because what 10 years ago I was drinking and smoking and things like that very heavily, and that's all I was doing. So I would be like, just, don't do that stuff, like, yeah, I don't know. That's what I would say to myself.
Um, I know your comic isn't a superhero comic, but if you were a superhero, what would your power be?
For me, it would be I've always wished I could fly like Superman, Yeah, that would be so cool. I've had dreams about flying actually. Yeah. Anyway.
Uh, I would, oh, teleport. Yeah. Like when you're sitting in traffic or something. Like I really wish I could teleport. Yeah.
Those are both good ones. Um, so usually, because I usually interview one person, I ask for 5 people you invite to dinner. But instead, what couple, dead or alive, would you want to double date with?
Couple that are alive. What do you think, yo?
No. Nobody, because no, I'm just kidding. So like anybody like in history or like
Anyone in history?
celebrities or
Yeah.
What couple?
no.
What couple? Well, that's kind of a thought-provoking question. Yeah. Maybe I would like to have a double date with.
That's Sinatra.
Oh
Really
yeah,
Sinatra.
Frank Sinatra and his wife. Yeah, that's what would be. He's like my musical idol. But anyway, yeah.
Cool. Soul, similar answer? Or do you
No,
have a
it
different
wouldn't be Sinatra. I don't know. Maybe Martin Luther King Jr. And
Oh,
I guess yeah, his wife. Yeah. Because I mean I teach about him and every time I read about um like just what he did and like how strong he was. And I know that he has faults too, but yeah, it's just amazing.
No, I mean everyone has their faults, but like there's
Right.
still inspiration there. So it's
Right.
yeah.
obviously there's inspiration there. So I get
Uh-huh.
it. Closing it out, what would the title of your autobiography be?
Kind of autobiography. What do you think?
Out of order.
Yeah, maybe right here.
Okay.
It's right here. Out of order.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think that I mean we were so happy to come up with that title. Like yeah, because it's so fitting like our relationship and our life and then the comic book also is told out of order. Like it's not told chronologically. Yeah, so it's supposed to be both. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for your time. It's been awesome to get to know you both, and I'm super looking forward to the hearing that you guys get a publisher because I'm gonna manifest it and say it. I'm just like I'm hoping that it happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to link out of order and how people could support and follow along with your story. And that's about it. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much. Really.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you again to Mike and Soul for being on the podcast and talking about their comic book, their relationship, and how they get through their struggles with mental illness. It was super inspiring for me to hear their story and how they came together and the way that they're still together because Soul and the way that she is there for Mike unconditionally, and for Mike, the way he let his guard down for someone that he loves, and that's like not easy for people. Mental illness or not, putting your guard down and letting love in can be really hard. So I wish nothing but the best for them. And linked in the episode show notes is their comic book and how to find them. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to our show for our episodes releasing on every other Tuesday. You could give us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. If you would like to support our podcast and help us grow, you can do it with a donation to the link at the bottom of the episode description. To hear more about Changing Tides, follow us on Instagram at LTSC_Changing Tides, or check out our website, thechangingtides.org. Let's continue to change the tides on mental health. We got